This week's lens is deconstruction, which is largely a philosophical approach to reading that was developed by the French critic Jacques Derrida. Deconstruction attacks assumptions that were made by new critics. So specifically, in terms of what we talked about last week, a text is the idea that a text is unified, that it has a single, stable meaning. This is the main point that deconstructionists will dispute. So Derrida suggests instead that all interpretation only references other texts. In other words, there is no outside text at all, which makes it impossible to find stable meaning. So doing a deconstructionist reading means identifying contradictions instead of unity, similar to what we did with new criticism, but then revealing how a text means a variety of things that differ from its unifying meaning or theme. It's breaking apart rather than putting together a text to examine its individual parts, and it does not put them back together again. So deconstruction, like structuralism, which we'll get to shortly, holds that meaning comes from binary oppositions, such as happy versus sad, inside versus outside. So one item is always favored over the other. There is never an equal balance. So playful, creative, deconstructive interpretations try to reverse this favoring of one binary over another and challenge very rigid thinking about a text as closed rather than open. Deconstructionists believe that meaning is always unstable and open-ended. Literary meaning in particular is plural, not singular, and it's an endless play of signifiers, which can never be connected to a single center, essence, or meaning. Words make sense to us only in relation to other words. We understand good as the opposite of bad. And then, of course, Michael Jackson flips that even around in his song, Bad, which is good. Deconstructionists love this. They love puns, which have multiple meanings in the same discourse, though not everyone receives all the meanings that puns contain, and every listener will receive at least one. And what he or she receives can be different from each other. Derrida's paper on structure, sign, and play argues that, quote, there is no possible outside text. In other words, meaning can't get outside language to reality. So words must always refer to other words. He's working here with Saussure, who said that the relationship between signified and signifier is arbitrary, constantly changing, and developing in these kind of slippages. If the relationship is direct, all languages would use the same word. Derrida is sometimes interpreted as anything goes, since nothing has real meaning or truth. He's also extremely rigorous. It's a type of interpretation that's very self-conscious and on guard. Deconstruction is a language of game playing, and it uses critiques and techniques of new criticism to explode them and expose gaps in language. An irony of this approach is that the attempt to explain anything is doomed to fail. When we want to understand something, we label it, but by labeling it, we force it into a binary. Derrida wants us to question the words we use and how they impact what we observe. Zombie, for example, is dead and alive, desexualized and lacking in clear agency, inner and outer, all at once. Another way to understand this is to be thinking about the act of measuring something. So there's a principle by Heisenberg called the uncertainty principle. And if you've seen Breaking Bad, Walter White names his alter ego Heisenberg. But in short, this anthropologist studies villagers and the way they change. The villagers being studied change the way the village is interpreted. So by being observed, the very act of observing changes the subject, and it changes the measurement. In addition to Derrida, we have key deconstructionists such as Michel Foucault, Roland Barthes, J. Hillis Miller, and Jacques Lacan, Jonathan Culler, and Barbara Johnson, who are all contributing to theories of deconstruction. Some important words to keep in mind while we're thinking about deconstruction this week and breaking down meaning in Jekyll and Hyde. So the first is binary oppositions, which we've talked about. Another is aporia, which is the moment of undecidability when the contradictions within a text can't be resolved. So Derrida cites the contradictions at work in Rousseau's use of culture and nature by demonstrating that Rousseau's sense of the self's innocence in nature is already corrupted by the concept of culture, and vice versa. Difference is a word that contains multiple meanings. The concept means différer, or to differ, différence, which means to delay or postpone, and the idea of difference itself. So to oversimplify, words are always at a distance from what they signify. And to make matters worse, they must be described by using other words. We are trapped within language. Finally, trace, from Louis Tyson's meaning seems to reside in words only when we distinguish their difference from other words. For example, if we believe all objects were the same color, we wouldn't need the word red. Red is red only because we believe it to be different from blue and green. So the word red carries with it the trace of all signifiers that it's not. Tyson's explanation explains what Derrida means when he states the trace itself does not exist. So in summary, doing a deconstructionist reading means turning to the text in order to turn it against itself, revealing gaps and contradictions between word and meaning. So this week, the full title, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the word case itself has various meanings, some of which contradict each other. A case is a study of a person, and it is an enclosed space, like Jekyll's cabinets and closets. The word story has a similar function, referring to the narrative itself, but also to the levels of the buildings. These slippages produce contradictions and ambiguity that do not lead to new critical unity. So deconstruction is not just a way to deconstruct or dismantle meaning, it is also a way to multiply it. It encourages readers to challenge easy answers and first readings and to resist the idea that there is a single unifying meaning to a text.